Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast, the Quarter Life Crisis Club. Today, we'll be talking about a topic that every college senior can relate to. We're talking about the psychology of your early 20s, the changes that you experience right after graduating college, and the stress that comes with it. Everyone featured on this podcast is a current senior majoring in psychology. They will each be talking about their own areas of interest within this topic.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Brigham Young, and I'll be discussing the ever-present stressor of social comparison and how we can manage the resulting psychological burdens that can stem from seeing our peers thrive.
Hello, and I'm Renato Swan Jr., and it's with great gratitude that I'm in a position to be able to talk to you guys about something that I think about often. Moving back home after college and readjusting to your at-home life and the environment that you're going to be living in, which comes with its own set of challenges.
Hi, guys. My name is Jessica Lunt, and I'm so excited to be on this podcast. Morgan, thank you for having me. I think the topic today is something that so many people, including myself, can relate to and learn from. And a little bit later, I'm going to dive into the life transitions that we experience post-grad and some of the stresses that come with that time and that we may experience.
Hey there, I'm Avery, and I'm so excited to delve into the positives that come along with the stressors of post-grad life. There's often an emphasis on the scary parts of this major transition, and I hope to change some perspectives.
After hearing from these wonderful guests, we'll have a group conversation giving some advice to our listeners that goes beyond the Quarter Life Crisis Club. We hope that everyone listening today will find this conversation informative and useful as we transition into our postgraduate lives.
Hello again, everyone. Another big thank you to our host, Morgan, who so graciously invited me to speak on a topic that I find ever so relevant given our age group. As young adults, it's already so difficult to understand our place in the world. Although it may not seem like the case, feelings of uncertainty and a lack of understanding of the world around us are both very normal and very okay. Each and every individual faces their own unique set of circumstances, meaning that there is no universal timeline for achieving success, no matter how you choose to define it.
Well, thank you again, Brigham, for being on this podcast. I'm really looking forward to learning more about social comparison. Can you tell me a little bit more about how loneliness relates to social comparison?
To put it bluntly, Morgan, we're social animals. Our essence as human beings is dependent on our relationships with others. Unfortunately for us, we live in a time where social media enables communication and connection regardless of physical presence. With that logic, one would think that loneliness should be eliminated, right? Well, in fact, our innate urge to seek meaningful connections can have adverse effects on mental health, especially when we begin engaging in social comparison. When we seek community and consequently end up feeling even more dejected, feelings of loneliness are only confounded.
This is really interesting, seeing how our human nature causes us to just constantly search for community. But where in our modern world do you think social comparison is the most present?
I think the example most people turn to is social media. It's so obviously formatted to perpetuate this unrealistic standard of living, and yet we still fall for it. This tendency known as upward social comparison, or comparing oneself with someone judged to be better than oneself, is so detrimental for adolescent and young adult mental health. Our relative inability to embody the influencer lifestyle really does deflate self-esteem.
I think that is so true and something we are affected by every single day. Have you ever fallen victim to social comparison? What emotions came out? How did you navigate that situation?
Yeah, of course. I'm only human after all. I'd say at least once a day I find myself comparing my life to those I'm sharing on social media. Although I have an understanding of how harmful it can be, I'm just as susceptible as anybody else. I've encountered a plethora of different ways to counteract the surge. For example, many of my friends who struggle with managing social media related stress opt to set application limits, that is, setting themselves a limited number of hours per day that they are able to access certain apps like Instagram or TikTok. One friend hasn't found that was enough, and he even opts to delete the apps from his phone during the week and re-download them on the weekends. In theory, both of these methods could reduce the amount of exposure we have to others' lives and in turn reduce the severity of social comparison.
We've definitely established that social media is like a hotbed for social comparison. But I'd like to ask about another environment that sees a lot of this phenomenon, which is the workplace. So, can you tell me more about how social comparison comes up in professional settings?
I'm so glad you asked. I actually just recently encountered some fascinating writing by graduate student Sophie Merks out of Erasmus University. She examined the extent of social comparison on the career/work-based platform LinkedIn, which is a mainstay in the corporate world for both job hopefuls and employers. Many young people who are active on LinkedIn are following, are are connected with peers who, in my experience, frequently post about personal achievement. This, of course, creates an idealized perception of who we should be, which can be harmful if we don't feel like we quite embody that archetype. Unfortunately, Morgan, at its core, social comparison is an urge rooted in agentic qualities. Comparing ourselves on the basis of success and relative competency is inherently self-oriented, which begs the question, how can we reconstruct our relationship with self-perception to be unaffected by the constant bombardment of social media and our especially successful peers?
I'd like now to introduce our next guest, Renato, who will be talking to us about moving back home after college.
Hey Morgan, much like your previous guest, Brigham, I also did some research on my own. One of my biggest findings from the article titled Self-Esteem Change During the Transition from University to Work by Ann K. Ritz, published in the Journal of Personality in August of 2020, is that when moving back home from college, finding a job that supports the career path you wanted to pursue is a lot more difficult than we think. Because of this, young adults like ourselves are more prone to self-esteem issues and feelings of not being good enough, but in reality, so many of us go through it.
So, like you said, moving back home comes with a lot of challenges, especially trying to navigate a relationship with your parents or other household members after living as this independent adult in college. So, what can we do to still feel like this autonomous adult when we're living in our parents' house?
That's a great question, Morgan. As I find myself preparing to move back home with my mom, maintaining my sense of independence and adulthood are going to be very important for me. I plan on going back home, getting a job in my field, and finding new friends as I anticipate losing a lot when I graduate. The biggest thing I don't want to do is reminisce about my college experience too much and begin to search for this type of lifestyle in my adulthood, simply because I just know it's not going to be good for me.
We've talked before that we're both moving back home after graduation. We're both living with our parents. And I agree that hopefully getting a new job and meeting new people will help me to maintain some sort of independence in this living situation. So can I ask, what are you doing now to prepare for this transition back home?
I'm mentally preparing simply by enjoying my time here in college while I still have it. I not want to look back on my time here and regret not doing something or not seeing my friends one last time. However, I still find myself thinking about my life and what it's going to be like when I move back home. It is through some of my research that I've found and come to terms with what my life may be like. There's an article titled Leaving Home, Moving to College, and Returning Home: Economic Outcomes in the United States by Maria Serrani, published in the Population and Place Journal in December of 2019, which pretty much sums up my current situation. It is believed that the timing in which you leave college, whether you complete it and then go home without completing college, is a huge factor in financial stability, which has become a huge stressor for me. Coming to college, there's a lot of talk on financial debt and the cost of college by itself. But one thing people fail to speak on are the other expenses that come with college, especially those who have to take out loans like myself.
Well, thank you, Renato, for sharing your experiences and your research findings. Hopefully, our listeners are able to relate to you, feel a little bit more comfortable if they're planning on moving back home after college. Next, we're going to talk with Jessica about the different stressors and life transitions that come with entering your 20s. So, welcome to the podcast, Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me on this podcast, Morgan. I can't wait to talk about this. I really find it so fascinating, and I can't wait to share what I know.
So, Jessica, many people say that your 20s are the best years of your life, but sometimes I think they fail to mention all the pressure and the stress that happens within this decade of our lives. Why do you think that this time is so challenging for some people?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Your 20s is a time where you go through so many big transitions, and those transitions can be really stressful. I mean, you're moving away from, the structure of this school environment that you've grown comfortable with over however many years. And then you're kind of expected to just enter the real world where, you're figuring out so many new things like your career, new relationships, like how to handle, new finances, just a lot of different changes. So, yeah, it's also definitely a time I think where it can be exciting because you get to explore so many new things and learn more about yourself as a person. But that exploration can also bring a lot of anxiety at times and uncertainty of, what's going to happen, what your future is going to hold. I mean, from personal experience, I'm a senior and I'm about to graduate and enter this real world. And, I do have a lot of internal fears and worries about what the future holds. So I think those stresses can definitely make this time very challenging for a lot of people.
Totally. I think so many 20-something-year-olds just feel overwhelmed by all these expectations and opportunities. How do you think this kind of pressure affects people's mental health?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that it can totally have a significant impact on your mental health. In one journal I read called Modern Psychology Studies, there's one volume called The Effects of Emerging Adulthood on Stress and Depression by Christine Cusack. And it mainly talked about how when individuals start to, enter emerging adulthood, new life events can cause a significant amount of stress, which unfortunately can lead to mental health issues later on, like depression. For example, someone may be starting their new career, and this is going to feel super unfamiliar at first and might cause this young adult to question their identity, which can then lead to feelings of sadness or, not being good enough. I think a lot of people feel this way, especially when they're entering a new role. They may be trying to meet expectations of being successful while also dealing with their own personal sense of identity and self worth. And I think at times it can feel like everyone else has it figured out, which only makes the stress worse. And I know that I can totally relate to this, and it's definitely, a stress of my own.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. So going back to your research, have you found any effective strategies for coping with this transition? We know that life transitions, it's a time of change, it's a time of stress, especially when there's this element of loss involved. And as we graduate, a lot of us are moving away from our friends, we're changing our routines. And I was wondering, what can we do to make this loss not feel as devastating?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, one book called Mindfulness for the Next Generation by Holly Rogers and Margaret Maytan goes into depth about this idea of practicing mindfulness. It kind of talked about how during, this time of new stress, slowing down and being able to focus on your thoughts can help you control them and not allow them to consume you. Because I think, that a lot of our fears and worries are going to cloud our judgment at times and kind of stray us away from the actual exciting parts of this new time. So I thought that this book was really eye opening, and I think it could be, I think mindfulness overall could just be such a great strategy to embrace these feelings of uncertainty instead of fearing them, which I know is definitely easier said than done. But I think it's something that a lot of people can try and incorporate more throughout their daily life. Another thing that I think can help us, make this loss not feel as depressing, um, is just keeping in mind the importance of self compassion. Being kind to yourself during moments of doubt or stress is so important for your mental health. I've been practicing this over, the past couple of years because throughout college, there have been many times where, I may question myself or what I'm doing or like what my future is going to look like. And just taking a moment and reminding myself that I'm only human and so many other people are feeling the exact same way as I am, I think helps a lot. And I think being kind to yourself is something that a lot of people may not realize can make such a huge difference.
I just love that. Being kind to yourself, it's so much easier said than done, but it's so important to help you live just a happier life. We've been focusing a lot on the research you've conducted, but I wanted to ask more about you personally. So, Jessica, what is one piece of advice you have for others who may be experiencing these stressors we've been talking about?
I would say that everyone who may be feeling these feelings right now, I know I am, I would say give yourself permission to explore and just take your time. I mean, as cheesy as it sounds, life isn't a race, and it's totally okay to not have everything figured out in your 20s. I think focusing on your own personal growth is what's important, and it should not be focused around perfection and comparison. So, yeah.
Great advice. I completely agree. Well, thank you, Jessica, for coming onto our podcast and sharing your insights with our listeners.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me, Morgan. It's been so fun getting to, talk more about this time of life that we're all going through. So, yeah, thank you.
Next, let's welcome Avery, who's hopefully going to bring the mood up and talk about some of the benefits of going through so many life transitions in your 20s.
Hey everyone, let's get right into talking about the positives that come with this big life change. The growth, the self-discovery, and all of the opportunities that come with stepping into this next phase of life. One of the biggest positives of post-grad life is the chance to explore who you are outside of an academic setting. For years, school has given structure to our daily lives, but after graduation, we get to redefine that structure for ourselves. A study published in Frontiers in Psychology found that self-reflection and career exploration at this stage of life improve adaptability, and they contribute to a greater sense of purpose and well-being. In other words, taking time to explore different career paths and interests is not just practical, it's actually good for your mental health. Another positive, you're not stuck on one path. Research on career adaptability shows that people who embrace flexibility and open-mindedness in their professional lives will experience lower stress and higher job satisfaction. A study in BMC psychology highlights how career adaptability helps individuals navigate change and uncertainty while maintaining their positive mental health. This means that even if your first job out of college is not your dream job or far from it, the ability to adjust and grow through your new experiences will set you up for long-term success and solid mental health. Outside of work, post-grad life is the perfect time to explore passions and hobbies that may have taken a back seat during college. Whether it's traveling, trying new fitness activities, developing creative skills, getting into a new sport, research suggests that engaging in leisure activities fosters personal growth and identity development. A study from Leisure Sciences found that pursuing new interests in early adulthood helps individuals build confidence, broaden their social networks, and develop a stronger sense of self. So, if you're worried about figuring things out, remember that experimenting and exploring new interests is actually a big part of that process. Post-grad life also brings new opportunities for friendships and mentorships. Without the structure of school, you have more freedom to surround yourself with people who truly inspire and challenge you. Whether it's coworkers, community groups, or new social circles, these relationships can bring fresh perspectives and opportunities that you never expected. So, if you're stepping into post-grad life, don't let uncertainty overshadow your excitement. This is your time to grow, explore, and create a life that aligns with who you are and who you're becoming. There's no rush to have it all figured out. Embrace the journey itself, and that's where the magic happens. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, post-grad life is not something to fear, but rather something to celebrate.
That was a lot of information to take in at once, but I think you'll agree with me that just simply viewing this time as a period of growth and opportunity is going to help combat a lot of these anxieties and challenges that happen in your 20s. On a more personal level, could you tell our listeners about a life transition you experienced? Tell us what emotions came up for you, how you navigated that situation, and what kept you motivated, and what kept you to maintain this life change.
Great question, Morgan. Thanks for asking. Honestly, a major life change for me was the transition from high school, living at home, having a solid structured routine, to college. I experienced a major gain of independence and the feeling of being free and being able to make my own choices and do what I wanted with my time. At first, this freedom was super exciting, super liberating. I could stay up until 2 a.m. and skip class when I wanted to, and that decision was up to me without the scrutiny of my parents or teachers. But then I began to experience the results of these actions with slipping grades and a lack of motivation, and, choosing the social learning over the book learning. The uncertainty and loss of control and structure kind of ruled my thoughts and dictated how I spent my time until I was able to adjust this and take hold of my actions. I learned that I am the only one responsible for my outcomes, just me. With this in mind, I was able to use my last few years in college to find myself, determine a goal, and discover my motivations. It's all about balance. I'm still working on it.
Yeah, I had similar experiences when I first came to college, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners can relate to this feeling. Hopefully, this experience can help us prepare for the upcoming transition into postgraduate life. So, what advice can you give to these listeners for them to hopefully see this transition as an opportunity for growth rather than a challenge?
I would say that it is important to take a step back and realize that you have time. Nothing you do has to be perfect. You have the ability to experiment and figure out what you want to do, what you want to be. There's no rush. There's plenty of people who change their career paths all the way through their 50s. So, if I could give one major piece of advice, it would be write it out. Figure out who you are and focus on that first.
Okay, so now we have our guest here for our group conversation. And I'll kick it off by asking, what are each of you worried about in the upcoming months as we begin this transition from college into post grad life? And what's been the most challenging for you so far?
My biggest worry is falling behind. I mean, there's no worse feeling than seeing those around you find their communities and settle into a new chapter in their lives while you're struggling to get your footing. Hearing about postgraduate plans of peers can definitely add to this fear. I mean, especially if they have like a cool job or an exciting trip lined up.
The biggest thing I'm worried about is controlling my emotions and dealing with my at-home life again in a healthy manner, which I'm having a hard time thinking about as of now. Since I've been here at college, I've been able to do what I want when I want, which will not be the case when I move back home. At home, we have two dogs, and my mom works a lot, so with that, I will have to step up and take some responsibility that I'm not quite accustomed to.
I would say that some of my worries for the upcoming months are just figuring out what graduate school I'm going to attend or if I'm even going to go at all. I'm still waiting to hear back from some of the schools, and it's definitely a stressful waiting game for sure. I think I'm also just, worried and a little bit sad about saying goodbye to my friends I've made here at Miami and not necessarily knowing, when I'm going to see some of them again. I've spent so much of my time with these people, and not getting to see them every day anymore is definitely going to be a big change. And it's kind of daunting, too, to think about all the new connections and friendships I'm going to form in the future. So yeah, I think those are definitely some of my worries.
My concerns lie in the arena of keeping up. I decided to change my career trajectory at the last minute, and I honestly don't know what that'll hold for me. but I'm looking forward to seeing what will come, and looking at it with an open mind.
Thank you all for sharing. I'm sure many of our listeners can relate to your experiences. And for myself, I'm continuing my education here at Miami. So I'm not living a post college life quite yet. But I do have a lot of the same worries as you guys. I'm worried a lot about moving back home with my mom and grandparents, being their full time caregiver, as well as a full time grad student. I'm also sad that I'm no longer going to be living with my roommates and my best friends. Worried that we might grow apart as they're moving back home and starting their jobs, and I'm not gonna have that social support that I've gotten used to here in undergrad. Um, and so for my next question, I wanted to ask, what are you most excited for after graduation in a few weeks?
I think I'm most excited for the opportunity to focus on and own my skills in the areas I'm truly interested in. I think that like so much of my productive energy is spent on assignments and classes outside my areas of interest that I get kind of antsy at the thought of giving like 110% of my abilities towards my passions. Like that's so cool to me. Um, I'm also excited to relocate, and hopefully become part of communities that support my long-term goals and interests.
The thing that I'm most excited for when it comes to having a bachelor's degree and is being able to say I have completed college. Coming from a family where only my mother has graduated college, it is something that I'm very proud of. Graduating is such a bittersweet moment at this point in my life, but I just need to understand that my life is actually about to start in terms of my career. It has been a long road for me to get to where I am today, and to be able to say I survived and graduated college is going to be my biggest accomplishment yet, with everything afterwards only getting bigger.
I think the thing that I'm most excited for after graduation is just being able to celebrate the fact that I made it through 4 years of college and am now gonna have my own college degree. So I think that's a huge accomplishment. This also was just such a big part of my life, and it's gonna be cool to be able to look back at all of the hard work and dedication I put into my education. Yeah, it'll also be so fun to get to celebrate with my friends and family because it's just such an exciting time, and I can't wait to not only celebrate, myself, but also the people that I went through this experience with. I'm also excited to hopefully start preparing for either graduate school or finding my first job to start on my career path. And even though it's kind of scary to think about, I know that change is inevitable and I'm definitely excited to embrace it rather than fear it.
I'm so excited to graduate as I've decided on a new life path postgraduate. I'm going to be doing an accelerated nursing program in hopes of being a psychiatric nurse practitioner. Beyond that, I'm just so ready to explore my independence and making my own decisions and just sitting with the ability to go whatever direction I want.
I agree with you, Renato and Jessica. The fact that we've earned our bachelor's degrees is something worth celebrating. And like you, Avery, I'm most excited to be going to grad school, to meet new people, and just to begin working in my field of study and begin doing what I'm most passionate about. And going into our next question, I know this podcast has made us reflect a lot on our own college and post college life. And I'm going to ask the group if there's any information you learned or conversation we had, or really anything that's just inspired you or maybe comforted you as we begin this transition.
One of the biggest things I learned is that the transition is not going to be easy. But knowing this now prior to graduating is going to benefit me a lot in the long run. It's something which is something that I've begun to notice. I would also like to mention that if you're also about to graduate, make the most of the moments you have left because they will fly by. And looking back on it, if you don't make the most of a moment, you will regret it. Leaving college with regrets is something I do not want to do because it's only going to make my transition back home tremendously more difficult.
Being on this podcast has been such a cool experience, and I'm definitely going to be walking away with new insights that I can apply to my own life. I think that one of the most important things I've realized is just how important it is to prioritize your mental health during this time. I feel like I've recently been too hard on myself when it comes to thinking about my future and whether or not I'll be good enough. This is not a healthy mindset and is definitely something that I want to change. Being mindful and taking care of yourself is something I want to prioritize in my life a lot more, especially as I'll be facing all of these changes once I graduate. Another thing I would say I've taken away from this is that change is exciting. I feel like sometimes we definitely fixate on the negatives, which just makes us forget how many new opportunities and experiences we will have. Yeah, change is natural and it's something that should be celebrated. And yeah, I definitely have a more positive outlook on, graduation and all of the changes after being on this podcast and getting to hear everyone speak about different topics. So yeah, I'm so, so happy I got to be on this podcast. I definitely learned a lot.
I now realize that this can be a really vulnerable time for people, with there being a heightened risk for mental health complications and an increased susceptibility to risk factors. Progressing to this point of our lives is a real achievement. I think we must also take the time necessary to nurture healthy habits so that our pursuit of success and our goals are not hindered going forward.
This podcast really opened my eyes to the fact that everyone feels similarly about going on to a new life after college. It's a normal step in the process. That makes me feel less anxious about, quote unquote, making it out there in the real world.
Well, thank you all for sharing. For me, hosting this podcast has made me feel a lot more confident about myself and my plans after graduation. I really appreciate getting to know all of you a lot better. And I feel a lot less alone knowing that we're all going through similar things and we all have many of the same concerns. We may not have everything figured out right now, but it's okay. There are all these exciting opportunities to look forward to in our future. That concludes this first episode of the Quarter Life Crisis Club. We're hoping that this podcast has informed you about some of the reasons why there are so many life changes in your 20s and why it can be such a stressful time. We hope that our listeners feel comforted by the information and the experiences shared by our guests. First, we talked to Brigham, who told us about social comparison and social media, that it's natural to compare ourselves to others, but it can harm our mental health and self-esteem. Next, we spoke to Renato, who shared some research about the difficulties of finding a job in your career after college and the stress of moving back home and living with family members. Jessica talked to us about how we can manage some of the stress and changes that happen in your 20s. Avery, our final guest, spoke about the importance of reframing this transition as an opportunity for new experiences and for growth. Lastly, we came together to have our group conversation in which we heard more about the personal experiences of our guests as they begin to prepare for graduation and what the future holds for them. We hope you're able to relate and can seek comfort in hearing our stories. I think the biggest takeaway from this episode is to remember that you are not alone in your experiences. Everyone's going through something, and it's okay not to have everything in life figured out. Remember to be kind to yourself. Give yourself room to make mistakes and take time to reflect on your experiences and the emotions they bring up. Think of your 20s as a time of growth, not of perfection. Once again, I'm Morgan, and I thank you for listening to this time to us members of the Quarter Life Crisis Club.